Hello, I'm Daniela. In today's video, we're going to make a mixed media tag. And this is beautiful because it looks so different depending on the papers you use. Now, I combined paper, cardboard or cardstock, and then some kind of lace or ribbon or trim. Any of those things are optional. You can pick and choose which ones you include. And this is a great project to use up paper scraps. These tags are wonderful for journals, particularly junk journals, because there's so much space that you can write on them. So let's get started.
So to start with for your tag, you're going to need to gather your supplies. I'll talk about each of them fairly quickly. Use an assortment of paper. Now I have boxes of paper, scrapbook paper, paper that I created, pattern paper, copy paper, cardstock, anything. And I just chose a bunch that has a similar color scheme. So I'm going to use these. These are kind of neutrals, creams, and just a little hint of color here and there. And you want to cut them into strips. Now this is just the scrapbook paper, but when I cut them into strips, I'll cut them into varying size strips. And that is based on the size tag that I use. So this is just a paper tag. You can use a paper tag, or you can take some scrap cardboard, even corrugated cardboard would work, depending on the thickness that you are looking for or not looking for. And then you just create the tag based on the size you want. It doesn't have to look anything like this. It doesn't have to be a standard tag, although you certainly can cover a clothing tag or a shipping tag. So to make the tag, if you don't have a template, you don't really need one. You can just use a pair of scissors. You want to cut a rectangle, whatever size you want. So here I can have a skinny tag or a little thicker one. I'll use the thicker one. And now to create the actual tag shape, you can certainly keep it rectangular shaped, but I like to just cut one side off. I take the piece that I cut off, line it up, and then just try and match it up. And then I have a little tag here. I'll take a hole punch, I eyeball where I want that hole to go, and then I have a tag that I can use. This cardboard happened to have a white background and then the standard craft color background. So I'll use this white background as the back of the tag, and I'll cover this part. And again, I could trim this down if I thought it was too tall or too wide, if I have too much space up here. So really play around with it. It doesn't have to look like any other tag. And then you'll cut your strips of paper. And I like to always throw in something a little unexpected, a piece of lace, trim, maybe even fabric. So I'll cut these into strips of varying sizes, and then we'll work on our tag. Now, if I'm using paper for my strips as opposed to fabric or ribbon or anything else really, because you can use a lot of different things. This particular paper was a gift bag, so it's paper, but there's something else into it. I don't know what that is, but it's very thick. And so it might require a little more adhesive than just say a piece of paper. And a little cardstock will require a little more adhesive than paper. But as paper artists, you get a feel for this and you just start to know what works and what doesn't. For a long time, I didn't have success with glue sticks, and then I switched brands. The Oohoo I find to be a really great brand. So please, if you have any suggestions or glue sticks that you have experience with that work for you, please comment below. You could also use Mod Podge, but my current mood is I don't want to use a wet adhesive if I can avoid it. If I'm going to use a wet adhesive, I find the fabric tack is an excellent glue. It's a little fussy to work with, but you can't beat its staying power, and it is somewhat flexible when it dries, which I really like. You can't sew through it, but for today's project, I'm not going to do that anyway. I find sometimes these scrapbook adhesives on these rollers are very helpful. Again, it varies by brand, the age of the adhesive and whatnot. And red lining tape I find to be my go-to for adhering almost anything to anything else. Works with fabric, paper, cardstock. So now that I have my strips cut out, you can see they're all varying widths. You decide if you want your tag, the strips to go vertical or horizontal. I've already decided I want these to go vertical. So I cut my strips accordingly, but you can make the tag diagonal if you'd like. I like to start with my biggest strip that I cut, and sometimes I don't give much thought to which one I'm cutting larger. This one I did because of this paper being so thick. And so I just trim it down somewhat and I place it. And none of these placements are permanent just yet. So I'll just play around. I might go back and trim some of these strips thinner if they're like these two are very similar, if I'm going to use more than one. And I also want to make sure that there's variation in all the strips that I put down. So right now I'll just play around with the placement of my strips. So here I have kind of a nice tag with the pieces. The next stage would be to adhere each of them down. And I'm leaving a lot of overhang. I'll just trim that off later. So once I have my setup, I remove the pieces I don't want so I don't get confused. And then I just slide my pieces to the side, knowing that I'll build out and work my way in. In this case, I'm going to start with this adhesive, and I'll just put it down right on my tag here. And then I just start to build the tag. I'll do that with all the pieces, leaving a little overhang on all the sides. So once I have my strips adhered down, the one thing I find universal, no matter what adhesive I'm using, is to really burnish that well. I want to make sure all that adhesive really touches all those areas on that tag. And then from here, I can just trim off the pieces. So now you have a really great, simple tag just with all these strips of paper. You can stop here. You can add a little ribbon up top. I had these two ribbons that I thought coordinated really nicely. So now I'll just figure out if I want to add them in. So I think that's what I'll do. For this to really hold it down, I'm going to use some of this red tape. I'll put a strip here, attach my ribbon, and then attach my ribbon up top. And there I have my completed tag. There's a little bit of unexpected texture with the trim here. I have the beautiful lace that echoes the colors in the tag. And then I have a beautiful tag. There's room on the back for journaling or adding a picture or a pocket. I can even continue to add things to the tag, and that's one of the reasons they're so versatile. Let me show you some variations using the same technique, just slight modifications. So here's a much smaller tag. Instead of going vertical, I went horizontal. I used a little bit of fabric in there, just some glue to hold it down, no sewing. And then instead of wrapping my ribbon through the hole on the back here, I just stapled it. This gives a little flatter result that might look better or work better tucked in a journal, depending on the thickness of the ribbon you use. So I really like how that captures those colors. There's so much texture and unexpected combinations. Here's another one with the horizontal stripes, the pinks and the turquoise, teals, greens. It's just beautiful. I have the trim here, some ribbon up top. I love that. There's a perfect spot for journaling here as well as on the back. And then the last tag, I used a really heavy piece of cardstock. So this really stands up. And I didn't have enough paper here to make a single strip, so I just combined it. So this strip has actually multiple strips. I've got some book pages here and there. I repeated it. And I added this twine, this braided twine to the side. Love it. It's just a beautiful effect. It's great for adding to your journal, a gift tag, or even you can make a little book just out of the tags. I hope you find this technique really helpful for your journaling and your artistic expression.
So that's how I create my mixed media tag. It's very fun, it's simple, and because of the lines in parallel, whether they're vertical or horizontal, or even if you want to go diagonal, it produces a different result each time. Each of the strips can be a varied width, or they can all be the same width, and that's what's so unique. You can even overlap them. So many possibilities. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe. And if you'd like additional content, please consider becoming a paid member of my channel. Thank you for joining me today.